I have a question for you. Have you observed a leader struggling with indecision, or is this a challenge you yourself have faced? Well, if you're aiming to grow your leadership skills, then you should be aware of this. Hesitation does not simply delay progress, it erodes trust. And what we're going to get into today is how that hesitation can quietly sabotage your influence and what to do when fear, pressure, or even perfectionism make you pause too long. Welcome to Crossroads and Catalyst, the podcast with Shanita B. I am your host. This is where we discuss the thoughtful, wise, and strategic perspective at a crossroads can be the catalyst for change. I have seen indecision and the impact of it when leaders choose not to make a decision many, many times over the course of my career. And what it always does is it definitely weakens trust, but it stalls growth. And not only does it stall the growth of the leader themselves, but it could stall the growth of the employees who are working under that particular leader, and it could also hinder or harm the progress and performance of the organization itself. So, today we're going to get into why some leaders freeze, how to spot indecision in yourself, and what to do when your leader refuses to make the call. Whether you're in a leadership role or you're trying to get there, this conversation will challenge you to show up and will help you to move forward. So, what happens when leadership fails to make decisions? Well, quite frankly, nothing. And that is not a good answer. That is not the result that you want. Because when nothing happens, that means that there's no progress, there's no movement, there's nothing that is being done in light of this particular situation that needs a decision. So to not do something, and I take that back. While nothing is what appears on the surface, what is actually happening is you're going backwards. So you might have heard people say, if you're not growing, you're dying. Well, it's the same thing when it comes down to making a decision. If you're not moving forward, then you're moving backwards because everything and everyone else is continuing ahead full speed, and you're just remaining where you were thinking, twiddling your thumbs, whatever it is that is causing you to pause and to stop and to not make a decision, those things are still there. But everybody else, again, they've continued to move on. And so what you might find is that you're being left behind. And that is not a good place in which to find yourself. What is the definition of decisiveness? Well, Cambridge Dictionary says it is pretty much just this: the ability to make decisions quickly and confidently. Now, listen to those two words, quickly and confidently. We do not want to misconstrue that the word quickly means rash or reckless, because that's not at all what it means. But then you listen to the other word, you look at the other word, and it says confidently. That means that you're putting something out there, and you have some level of assurance that things will work out. Does not mean that the decision is perfect, does not mean that you had all of the data and the information that you needed to make the decision. It just means that you're going to be assured that when you move forward with deciding and selecting A versus B, well, there's a level of confidence that again that it'll be fine, and maybe it'll be as you intended, maybe it'll be better than intended, and possibly it might not work out as well as what you had hoped, but at least you made a decision. So that's what's really important. And just so that we're clear, indecision is a decision. You've just chosen not to move forward and to let things just kind of hang out there. And depending on what the situation is, it's not going to hang too long. Because, again, like I just said not too long ago, indecision is a decision. And if you're not moving forward, then you're being left behind, and everybody else is probably going to be winning. And you're just going to be standing, looking around, trying to figure out what to do next. Why does indecision happen? Well, especially among those people who are supposed to be leading. Well, I have a few things here that I think contribute as to why people have chosen to not make a decision and not move when really something needs to be done, and it really has to come from them rather than everyone else. Fear is at the top of the list. Fear undermines so many things in our lives. And when it comes down to the types of characteristics and traits that we should possess as not only as leaders, but just as decent people and good professionals in the workplace, fear is one of those things that is often hidden and cloaked as something else. So, this could be fear of making the wrong decision. It could be fear of fallout. It could be fear of owning a mistake publicly. Definitely, nobody wants to look like the person who made the bad decision and caused the organization to lose money or to be bound in a contract that's not good for them or whatever the situation might be. But if a decision has to be made, you have to just come to the conclusion that everything is going to be okay. Our lives are not going to hinder. Our lives are not going to rise or fall on a particular decision that is made in most workplaces today. They just don't have that level of power and authority over us. So we have to be able to move past the fear and recognize that sometimes good decisions are made and sometimes not so good decisions are made. But it's just important in order to make progress that we choose something. And then another thing that I have listed here is perfectionism. And this is, pretty much the idea that unless all of the conditions are right and every answer is in place, nothing should move forward. This could not be further from the truth. And I can tell you personally, I have struggled pretty much for the course of my life of with perfectionism because I like things to be done right. And maybe that has to do with the fact that I'm a firstborn and I've pretty much attempted to excel in just about everything that I've done. And I like things to just be this particular way. And if they're not, it will tend to slow me down. So I have worked diligently to ensure that I do not allow things to lapse as a result of my desire to have things just right. So that means I need to get over myself, is what it comes down to. And so that would be my counsel to you is if you are suffering with perfectionism, you have to allow yourself room for the imperfect. You are not always going to have 100% of what you need. You're not going to have all of the data, all of the facts, but you have to make a decision anyway. So get used to the idea and take the steps toward making the decisions in those moments when they're absolutely necessary and critical. And then I have another couple of items on the list, or this is, you know, maybe synonymous pride and ego. And these are the leaders, they just don't really want to admit that they're uncertain. They want to look like they have it all together. And in the meantime, if you could see in their brains, they might be the ones who are sitting in the corner crying because they're not really sure what exactly it is that they're supposed to be doing. And again, that's okay because in the episode about resistance to change, I kind of glossed over or touched upon the fact that you have to be a little bit vulnerable when you're making decisions. As a leader, you're going to have to be vulnerable, which means that you're going to have to be okay with people having their thoughts and opinions about you. It's none of your business what they think. What you have to do is make a decision based on the information that you have that will be good for the organization and just go with it. And so when you think about all of those things, just those few things that I just mentioned fear, perfectionism, pride, and ego it could really be a recipe for disaster if these are the things that continue to hinder you from making a decision or the leader who is working above you. Uh, it causes so many issues. And again, since I've seen this many times over, I'm never really shocked at what I hear from maybe former colleagues um, talking about some things that have come up in work, but it's always disappointing because you really hope that the leader in a particular scenario is is willing to operate at a much higher level than what they really are. Because really what they've done is they've exchanged their position for a lower level position within the organization. They've pretty much shunned the responsibility that is due to them. It is really under their particular scope. But because they're indecisive, they just want to bury their heads in the sand and pretend that nothing is going wrong here, nothing to see here. We can just keep going on, business as usual. And I can tell you that what happens in those scenarios is the organization has a veneer of success, but on the inside there is turmoil, and it could just take one final stroke, some change within the economy, some regulatory change that occurs, and everything could blow up. And you definitely don't want to be at the helm of the organization when that happens, because it's certainly going to lie at that leader's feet if they have been the one who is supposed to have been making the decisions all along the way, and it's discovered that they really just kind of sat on their hands because they were afraid to make a decision. And this also reminds me of, just being in meetings, because we're such a meeting intensive work culture these days. We spend a lot of time in meetings, and I think a lot of us just don't even understand why, because somebody thinks that it's a good idea when really all it would require is a phone call, maybe between a couple of people, to just get some clarity and let's move on. But that's not typically what happens. But what I have found in a lot of the meetings that I've sat in over the years is that even the high level leaders, I'm talking VPs and C suite, they're looking around at other people to make the decisions, and really it's within their scope to make the decision, and they're just kind of complacent, I guess. And this tends to be the norm, because you see your colleagues and other staff looking at each other saying, okay, well, what's going on here? Well, who's supposed to be making the decision? And then you walk away and nothing is still done. There are no action items, there are no metrics, there's nothing. And so then we have to have another meeting to talk about what happened at the last meeting and why we didn't make a decision and what we were waiting on. And now everybody is running around trying to figure out, well, what did we talk about? Or where did we leave off? Whereas if it was just someone who had made a decision in those moments, we'd be done with it, and we it would be put to rest. But that's often the result of indecisive leadership. And okay, look, like I've already said, you're not going to have 100% of the information. And sometimes you just have to be satisfied with having 75 to 80% of the information so that you can move forward. And it's like that even with small things that require decisions, whether they're deadlines within your own team that that require reports that need to be pushed up so that other decisions can be made based on those reports. I have had many times to tell people, look, this is the best that we can do based on the timeline that we were given. I think that if we had had another several days or maybe even a week, we might have been able to attain a more confident number. And I've just told people, okay, I'm about 80% confident that this is a pretty good projection, or this is a good dollar figure, or whatever the case may be. And it's not always comfortable to do that, but you have to know that it's okay to do that. And just recognize that even when you do have the information is imperfect. So it's not necessarily about having perfect information. It's just about being able to assess and critically think through the information that you have available to you so that you can make an informed decision. I recently read an article, and I can't remember the name of the article, but I do remember that it was on CNBC, and so I'll find a link of it and put it in the show notes if you're interested in it. But it was very timely because it was a quote. It quoted the CEO of Google, and I believe his name is Sundar Pichai, and this is what he said. First, making any decision is better than wasting time ruminating on the options. And second, most choices aren't permanent, and you can learn from your mistakes if you make one. That's pretty sound advice. And he said that he learned this when he was a college student, which tells me that this is not only something that leaders should have, because most leaders, of course, you're graduated from college, you've been working for quite some time, and so a lot of leaders are pretty well seasoned. But what this means is that this is something that we should be considering while we're younger, teenagers, uh, young adults in college, and just earning and learning our way through life. You have to develop the skill of being decisive early on, because you do not want to be stunted in your growth. And you certainly don't want to leave major decisions to other people to make them for you, because I can almost guarantee you, you will not be satisfied. So, you know, where in your work or your life are you waiting for more certainty before you can make a decision? Think about that for a minute. It is so important that you make the choice and that you be okay with the choice. And quite frankly, even if the choice doesn't turn out to be what you had hoped, then you know that there's something else that you can do at that point to try to get yourself in the place where you want to be. It generally will work out pretty well. What does strong decision making look like? Okay, so I think that this is really important too. You have to be able to critically think through the issue. Ask those W questions: who, what, when, why, where, and of course how, which is not a W, but I think you get the drift. Um, Assess the risks. So you want to understand and gather as much information as you possibly can to answer the questions that are most important to that scenario. Number two, you want to be collaborative. You need to seek the input of other people, but you also don't want to be confined and paralyzed by consensus because maybe the groupthink has turned out to say we think that option A is best. And maybe you're thinking option B, and maybe there's no option C. Maybe there is, maybe there isn't. But you might not always be in agreement with other people, but if you can walk away with a better understanding as to what the pros and cons are and what other people's thoughts and opinions are about a particular set of circumstances, then you will be in a much better position to make a decision that will be helpful to you and the organization and possibly to the team that's working under you and under your leadership. And then this is another important thing. You have to know when direction is needed more than diplomacy. And by that, what I mean is it's always important to be tactful and recognize that there's probably going to be some fallout to some of the decisions that you might make. But the direction of the organization that you're serving, or even a personal decision that you're making about your life, that is going to be a priority. And so it might not always be received well when it comes to common knowledge what the decision is that you made, but it's yours, and you base that decision on the information that you had that you thought was really going to help to get you where you needed to go. Okay, so then ultimately, one of the other questions is, well, what if I'm not the one who's in charge? But I see that there's either some indecision that's being made, and by the lack of decision making, there's some trouble that's ahead. Well, this is what I would say. You want to seek out opportunities to present solutions to leadership and pose those questions in a way that push them to test or reassess and evaluate their own positions on a particular thing, especially if you're trying to grow into leadership. If you've developed a decent rapport with the person to whom you report, they would probably be more willing to listen to what it is that you have to say. And specifically because most of the reasons why people are indecisive is because of fear, you may have an opportunity to help to mitigate whatever issues that were causing that fear, that were underscoring the fear that they might be experiencing. And it may come to the point to where they would really trust the input that you would have and value that very highly. So I would say that you would want to proceed along those lines. Okay, so this is where the rubber meets the road. Because once you recognize indecision, you're at a crossroads. And really, what it comes down to is you can't lead from the shadows. You can't lead from the dark closet. You got to come out, step into the light, so that others can see you and take notice and recognize you as a leader. But in order for that to be the case, you have to come out and make some decisions. So you can either avoid the decision by burying your head in the sand, pretending like it doesn't happen, like it didn't happen, excuse me, uh, or or just completely shunning some of the information that has already been provided to you that highlighted I guess maybe a particular path that might actually be the one that you should have selected, but because of fear or whatever reason, you've just decided that, oh, we're just not going to make a move on that. Or you can face the decision. You can name the concern, you can gather the facts, you can listen to the right people and not just the loudest people. And what I would say is that you probably want to seek out those who appear to be the quietest ones because oftentimes they have a lot more insight and information that will help you to make an informed decision. Okay, so then, okay, so this is what I would say to that as well. When you talk to people, and once you've decided, okay, we're going to face the decision. I'm ready to make a decision, or I'm ready to gather the information that's necessary so that I can be a lot more informed about what course of action we need to take. Okay, you make a decision. I can guarantee you that even if the decision does not work out the way that you had intended, that the result of that will help you to make the next decision in a much more effective manner. Because again, to make a decision and be able to pivot is better than to make no decision and have a lot of damage that takes place as a result of not doing so. So, then how do we turn this into a catalyst? By recognizing the value of decisiveness in our own lives and in leadership, because it's not just about what happens at work. Again, decisiveness is something that is applicable to the whole person, to the professional and the personal life. So, this is why you really want to enhance that skill because it's such a practical skill and necessary to living. So, this is what I would say: we got to build the muscle and change the pattern, which means that you're going to have to practice being decisive. It's going to be very uncomfortable, especially if you recognize that it is fearful for you, or your pride and ego are in the way, or that you're a perfectionist, like I am. I'm a recovering perfectionist. And what you want to do is you want to exercise making quick decisions. What I would say is, even though it's going to be uncomfortable, it will be liberating for you to make a decision and then leave it alone. Go home, go to sleep, you'll be good. And once you see the results of the decision, you'll realize that it's no big deal. And I can almost guarantee you that if you offer up a decision in a meeting or in some type of group setting, after looking around and seeing that everybody's kind of quiet or they're looking at somebody else to make the decision, if you offer up some type of solution, most people will be so happy that you did. Oh, that's a great idea. Yeah, well, I don't know why we didn't do this sooner. Well, oh, we really appreciate that you offered that up. You will be so surprised at how eager people are to accept that solution and then move on to the next thing. So use that as an opportunity to show people that you have the skills and you have the competencies and the abilities to lead and to do the job, and take that for what it's worth. So then ask yourself this: what decisions have you been putting off that are quietly draining your energy? It's time to revisit that, to make a plan, and to take the first step. And let this be the moment that you stop spinning and twiddling your thumbs and just hoping that it makes a decision all on its own, and for you to move and to get on down the road. How about that? Well, I appreciate that you spent this time with me, and I'm so glad that we talked about this particular skill and how it presents itself in several different ways and some of the causes. I hope that you will take to account, excuse me, I hope that you will take to heart what you've heard, and if any of it resonated with you, I would love to hear about it. So you can feel free to send an email to me at theshanita.brown@gmail.com. And if you found any of this helpful, then please give me a like, subscribe, or a follow on the platform that where you're listening to this. And then finally, crossroads reveal who you are. Catalysts shape who you become. Every decision matters, so make it count. We'll talk to you next time.